All right, welcome to another video of the Rapture Hour. Today, we're going to be doing something different. We're actually going to be listening to the speech by President Zelenskyy to the UN General Assembly yesterday. So I'm going to play his speech, and then I'm going to share my comments as well from time to time. So if you like this kind of thing, if you like channels that talk about the end times, talk about Black Swan events, the book of Revelation, also obviously the Rapture, then you've come to the right place. So feel free to grab yourself a cup of coffee, sit back, relax. We're going to go through this speech together. It's about 15 minutes. So we'll see how long this video takes. The choice of coffee this morning, this isn't an advertisement, by the way, but this is what I'm actually having. I don't know if you could see that. Kind of hard to see. It is hard. There we go. Right there a little bit. Anyways, it's a Columbia balanced and nutty. This is one of those, what do they call it? Yeah, it's Columbia Starbucks edition, if you will. So I don't know if you could see these things here. Kind of cool. Instant. So you put one of these in your cup. Obviously, I like a lot of cream. That's not too bad. It's not too bad. All right, so let us jump right into President Zelenskyy's speech. Before I get started, what's interesting about this guy, and I just happen to be wearing green as well today, by pure coincidence, but this guy always wears green. He always wears t-shirts. He's very different than any other political leader. His rise to fame was pretty quick. He used to be a comedian, which is kind of interesting. He wrote a script for a series called We the People. I forget how many episodes it was. So he wrote a script, acted in it as well with his production company, developed by his production company. And then because it was a smashing success, he decided to run for politics, and then was elected to be the next president of Ukraine, which I believe he is the 6th president of Ukraine. And there's no coincidence, or it's actually a huge coincidence that in the Bible it talks about, in the end times, it talks about a leader in the book of Daniel as well, being the 6th, and then goes away, and then the 7th comes in for a short time, and then the 8th comes in, which is really the 6th, which is part of the 7. So it's kind of interesting that 5 have already moved away, and then now President Zelenskyy is the 6th. And again, it's just a coincidence, but I pay attention to stuff like this because there's lots of pieces to this jigsaw puzzle. I believe Zelenskyy is part of this jigsaw. I believe Elon Musk is part of this jigsaw. So is Klaus Schwab. Unbeknownst to him, he probably thinks he's doing mankind good. But I think he's the guy that's responsible for creating a worldwide tax. And then in the book of Daniel, it says the person that creates worldwide tax suddenly is removed, dies, if you will, but not because of war, not because of old age. He just dies mysteriously. It's my understanding. Obviously, the book of Daniel is quite a complicated book to understand, but you start seeing all these jigsaw puzzles and you start moving them around a bit. and you see Elon Musk playing around with Neuralink and trying to implant chips into our head. And then you see President Zelenskyy, and we're going to be watching this presentation, talk about peace. The only way to maintain peace is to have more weapons. And if we have more weapons, we can maintain peace. And he talks a little bit in other videos or other videos where he talks about creating a U-24. Maybe I'll make another video about that. But basically, it's an organization that is 10 times more powerful than the UN, which means if there's trouble anywhere in the world within 24 hours, he can act. Doesn't need permission from governments or anything. He could just, so if something's happening in a remote country somewhere that's being overruled by some dictator or something, the U-24 organization could come in less than 24 hours and wipe them out. That's what President Zelenskyy wants to build. And I believe he's going to have a huge building called the U-24 building in Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be a major player. That's just my humble opinion. But there's all these pieces going on right now. And so let's just listen to his speech.
Thank you very much. I welcome all who stand for common efforts, and I promise, being really united, we can guarantee fair peace for all nations. What's more, unity can prevent wars. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President, fellow leaders, this call so many wars, but not.
One thing before we get going into the speech again is to think about the common theme that's going to come out. And I haven't listened to this whole speech. I've listened to maybe 2 minutes of it so far, but this is my guess. You're going to hear a lot of rhetoric, if you will, or most of his presentation is going to be that in order to prevent wars from happening around the world, we all have to come together to prevent war. We have to prevent tyranny. In order to maintain peace, we have to be united, all on one page. And it's in the name of peace. And this is all over the book of Revelations, that the Antichrist, not saying that this guy is the Antichrist, because I've said that before, but I don't want to say that this is the guy, because then people get mad and all kinds of stuff. But I'm saying the Antichrist would be this type of person where they come in under the radar as peace with lots of favor around the world. Some people say Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Some people say it's this person from France. I forget what his name. The leader in France. I forgot his name all of a sudden. Anyways, so there's different players that could be, we don't know, could be a guy just like this. It's just interesting that his rise to fame happened almost overnight. Like, that doesn't happen. And then the first thing that he did when he became president of Ukraine is he dissolved parliament and had a snap election, and then became the only party, the We the People Party. Dissolved all the other political parties. So in some ways, it's almost like a dictatorship. In some ways. Anyways, let's play.
As active defender against the aggressions. In many cases, the fear of war, the final war, was the loudest here, the war after which no one would gather in the General Assembly Hall again. The Third World War was seen as a nuclear war, a conflict between states on the highway to nukes. Other wars seemed less scary compared to a threat of the so-called great powers firing their nuclear stockpiles. So the 20th century taught the world to restrain from the use of the weapons of mass destruction, not to deploy, not to proliferate, not to threaten with, and not to test, but to promote a complete nuclear disarmament. Frankly, this is a good strategy, but it should not be the only strategy to protect the world from the final war. Ukraine gave up its third largest nuclear arsenal. The world then decided Russia should become a keeper of such power. Yet history shows it was Russia who deserved nuclear disarmament the most back in 1990s.
What's interesting is what he just said, that Ukraine gave up their nuclear armaments and Russia's here. So I'm interested in seeing the camera show Russia, because Russia is also, my understanding is they're on with NATO as well. They're a part of NATO right now. I could be wrong. Sorry, not NATO. They're here at the UN Assembly. They are not part of NATO. NATO goes against Russia. That's why they were designed. But my point is, they are here at this UN General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly. That's what I meant to say. They're here. They're not part of NATO. NATO was built to go against Russia. So it's interesting that Zelensky says that they gave up their nukes, but then you have basically Russia and the US are the keeper, the ambassadors of the nukes, if you will. So again, you're going to keep seeing that theme come up, that there is a final war coming, and it's in the book of Revelation. It's called Armageddon. And he's already hinting that there is a final war coming, and we can't get rid of all these nukes because we need them to promote peace. So let's continue.
And Russia deserves it now. Terrorists have no right to hold nuclear weapons. No right. But truly, not the nukes are the scariest now. While nukes remain in place, the mass destruction is gaining its momentum. The aggressor is weaponizing many other things, and those things are used not only against our country, but against all of yours as well. Fellow leaders, there are many conventions that restrict weapons, but there are no real restrictions on weaponization.
One thing to note as well, and again, trying to emphasize, I'm not saying he is the Antichrist. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you can't trust political leaders. They all have their own agenda. I think we can all agree on that. Our prime minister has his own agenda. Joe Biden in the States has his own agenda, all this kind of stuff. I just want you to listen to the verbiage that is coming out of some of these leaders in the name of peace. And one thing to note is Ukraine is actually leading the way with artificial intelligence. They're leading the way with drones. Drones is their specialty. They are the best at it with their technology. So don't underestimate Ukraine as being a tiny player. They have one of the largest wheat resources in the world. They're a huge country. They're huge. They're a huge player. They're not this little tiny country. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. And they are getting lots of weapons in order to protect themselves. And again, I don't see anything wrong with countries protecting themselves from attack. I don't see anything wrong with that. But the U.S. is funding a lot of this as well. And this is what is getting Russia upset, is because they're seeing all this stuff happening. Meanwhile, the U.S. seems to be falling apart at the seams with President Joe Biden in power. And Russia is basically laughing at the U.S. and they're laughing at us as well in Canada with our leader. So anyways.
First, let me give you an example. The food. Since the start of the full-scale war, the Ukrainian ports in the Black and Azov seas have been blocked by Russia. Until now, our ports on the Danube River remain the target for missiles and drones. And it is a clear Russia's attempt to weaponize the food shortage on the global market in exchange for recognition for some, if not all, of the captured territories. Russia is launching the food prices as weapons. The impact spans from the Atlantic coast of Africa to the Southeast Asia, and this is the threat scale. And I would like to thank those leaders who supported our Black Sea Grain Initiative and program Grain from Ukraine.
Well, this is one thing that, again, probably most people don't realize this, but Ukraine is a huge exporter of grain. They export all over, especially in Europe as well. But the Black Sea plays a big part of this. And in the book of Revelation, it talks about one day a third of the ships will be destroyed in the sea. 1/3. And I think there's going to be a huge battle in the sea taking place in the future. And I think a huge part is going to be submarines. I think submarines is going to be the way to win the war at sea. It's not these big aircraft carriers. It's not the battleships. And again, I'm not a military guy. I'm just reading the Bible and I'm putting all the jigsaw pieces together. If you want to separate countries so that they don't know that there's an invasion coming, you got to cut all the submarine cables, all the cables that are under the sea. It's not the satellites. It's not the satellites up in the air, up in space that you have to worry about. It's the undersea cables that you have to cut those. And how do you cut those? Well, you probably use subs. You go right down there and you launch a few torpedoes, and you take out the infrastructure of all these cables, and you're not going to be able to communicate from America to Europe. They won't be able to communicate with each other. Why? All 99.999% of communication goes under the seabed. It's not in the satellites. It's under the sea. That's what most people don't know. So you take out those sea cables, you break communications, and you're not going to be able to communicate with Europe to find out what's going on there, and vice versa. Let's continue.
Thank you so much.
Ad time.
United, we made weapons turn back into food again. More than 45 nations saw how important it is to make Ukrainian food products available on the market, from Algeria to Spain to Indonesia and China. And even now, when Russia has undermined the Black Sea Grain Initiative, we are working to ensure food stability. And I hope that many of you will join us in these efforts. We launched a temporary sea export corridor from our ports, and we are working hard to preserve the land routes for grain exports. And it is alarming to see how some our friends in Europe play out solidarity in political theater, making thriller from the grain. And they may seem to play their own role, but in fact, they are helping set the stage to a Moscow actor. Second,
don't underestimate what he just said here. Zelenskyy is keeping an eye on people that are doing their own thing, and any country that is supporting Russia. He's keeping an eye on all these actors, if you will. It's almost like if you are not with him, you're against him. So if you support Russia, you're against him. So you're going to see this come up again and again in future speeches as well, that he's calling out different nations, especially if they're either doing nothing to support Ukraine. It's almost like they're indirectly supporting Russia.
Second, weaponization of energy. Many times the world has witnessed Russia using energy as a weapon. Kremlin weaponized oil and gas to weaken the leaders of other countries when they came to the Red Square. And now this threat is even greater. Russia is weaponizing nuclear energy. Not only it is spreading its unreliable.
I wonder what this guy is doing. I forget his name. Is he updating his TikTok? Or is he paying attention to the speech? Or is he watching a video? Some of these guys have translators, universal translators, if their English isn't so good. But notice he doesn't have a universal translation in his ear, so he may not be listening to Zelenskyy at all, unless he understands fluid English, which is possible. But I think his universal translator is right there. You'll see the Russian Federation sign. There's a little universal translator right there. So he doesn't have it in his ear like the other people. Something to think about.
Nuclear power plant construction technologies, but it is also turning other countries' power plants into real dirty bombs. Look, please, what Russia did to our Zaporizhia power plant. Shelled it, occupied it, and now blackmails others with radiation leaks. Is there any sense to reduce nuclear weapons when Russia is weaponizing nuclear power plants? Scary question. The global security architecture offers no response or protection against such a treacherous radiation threat, and there is no accountability for radiation blackmailers so far. The short example is children. Children. Unfortunately, various terrorist groups abduct children to put pressure on their families and societies. But never before the mass kidnapping and deportation would become a part of the government policy. Not until now. We know the names of tens of thousands of children and have evidence on hundreds of thousands of others kidnapped by Russia in the occupied territories of Ukraine. And
this is something new that I never heard before, that there were tens, if not hundreds of thousands of kids kidnapped by Russia. This is the first time I've heard of this. Obviously, if that's true, that is horrible. It's horrible that is happening. But this is the first time that I've heard Zelenskyy mention. He's probably mentioned it before, but it's the first time that I've heard it, that he's accusing Russia. And you could see them just almost right in front of him. They're the second row behind Paraguay, who's not represented, and Papua New Guinea, which is not there as well. So right behind Papua New Guinea is Russian Federation. So this is the first time I've heard this.
later deported. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrant for Putin for this crime. And we are trying to get children back home. But time goes by. What will happen with them? What will happen to them? Those children in Russia are taught to hate Ukraine, and all ties with their families are broken. And this is clearly a genocide. When hatred is weaponized against one nation, it never stops there. Each decade.
This is a new term as well. Genocide is not linked with actually wiping out a society, but it's linked to hate. So if you don't agree with someone or an organization, obviously he's talking about the children of Ukraine. But I'm saying, on another note, a political leader could use hate as genocide. if you're coming against another organization, another country, you could be accused of hate crimes that lead to genocide. So you need to be dealt with. So I think this is where President Zelenskyy is tying this in. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian children are abducted, are kidnapped by Russia. Again, never heard this before. But it's pretty serious accusation, obviously. And if you're converting those children against Ukraine, against their own home, their own parents, all this kind of stuff, this is considered genocide, in his words.
Russia starts a new war. Parts of Moldova and Georgia remain occupied. Russia turned Syria into ruins. And if not Russia, the chemical weapons would have never been used there in Syria. Russia has almost swallowed Belarus. It is obviously threatening Kazakhstan and other Baltic states. And the goal of the present war against Ukraine is to turn our land, our people, our lives, our resources into a weapon against you, against the international rules-based order. Many seats in the General Assembly Hall may become empty if Russia succeeds with its treachery and aggression. Ladies and gentlemen, the aggressor scatters deaths and brings ruins even without nukes, but the outcomes are alike. We see towns, we see villages in Ukraine wiped out by Russian artillery, leveled to the ground completely. We see the war of drones. We know the possible effects of spreading the war into the cyberspace. The artificial intelligence could be trained to combat well before it would learn to help the humanity. Thank God, people have not yet learned to use climate as a weapon. Even though humanity is...
This is interesting that he brings this up. He brings up drones. He brings up the concept that he says, what did he say? Did he say, thank God? That man hasn't learned to use weather to weaponize against people. That tells you it's on his radar, and it's on other political leaders' radar. Guaranteed it's on other leaders. Guaranteed they've thought, how can we use weather patterns to take out cities, to control populations, they're already doing it. They're already seeding the clouds. If you've never heard of cloud seeding, I won't go into detail in this video, but basically insurance companies pay organizations to fly into clouds to disperse the clouds so that they don't hail in certain communities. And we've seen this. So if you don't pay a premium price for insurance, your town, your area, your neighborhood could get hit by hail. So you pay the premiums for insurance, your community does not get hit by hail. They're doing this today. This is not made up. They're doing this today. So he's talking about weaponizing. I'm going to back it up a bit, but the idea that it's like, thank God or thank goodness that nations have not learned to weaponize weather patterns.
Cyberspace. The artificial intelligence could be trained to combat well before it would learn to help the humanity. Thank God, people have not yet learned to use climate as a weapon. Even though humanity is failing on its climate policy objectives, this means that extreme weather will still impact the normal global life, and some evil state will also weaponize its outcomes.
There it is right there. So he's basically saying indirectly that there's going to be an evil state that is going to weaponize weather. He just said, thank God nobody's mastered it yet. Guaranteed they're talking about it. Guaranteed other nations are talking about how can we do this, because then we don't have to invade a nation we can manipulate the weather so that there is drought. And this is in just about every James Bond movie that you can imagine. But it's interesting that a leader is talking about ideas of how to take out a nation. Now we're talking about using weather patterns, weaponizing weather.
And when people in the streets of New York and other cities of the world went out on climate protest, we all have seen them. And when people in Morocco and Libya and other countries die as a result of natural disasters, and when islands and countries disappear underwater, and when tornadoes and deserts are spreading into new territories, and when all of this is happening, one unnatural disaster in Moscow decided to launch a big war and kill tens of thousands of people. We have to stop it. We must act united to defeat the aggressor and focus all our capabilities and energy on addressing these challenges. As nukes are restrained, likewise the aggressor must be restrained, and all his tools and methods.
Here's another term. He used mountains being flattened earlier, or islands being flattened, being flooded, all kinds of stuff. This is pestilence, earthquakes, all the stuff that Jesus talked about. And then, what did he just mention here? Restrainer. And in 1 Thessalonians 4, I believe, Paul talks about he that letteth will let until the restrainer be taken away, and then the Antichrist will be revealed. He's just talking about we got to restrain. This is the first time I've heard him say restrain or restrainer.
Addressing these challenges, as nukes are restrained, likewise the aggressor must be restrained, and all his tools and methods of war. Each war now can become final, but it takes our unity to make sure that aggression will not break in again. And it is not a dialogue between the so-called great powers somewhere behind the closed doors that can guarantee us all the new wars era, but open war of all nations for peace. Last year, I presented the outlines of the Ukrainian peace formula at the UN General Assembly. Later, in Indonesia, I presented the full formula. And over the past year, the peace formula became the basis to update the existing security architecture. Now we can bring back to life the UN Charter and guarantee the full power for the rules-based world order. And tomorrow, I will present the details.
So it's interesting. I told you about this probably, when was it? A couple days ago. I said September 23rd is a day that you have to pay attention to. And President Zelenskyy, so tomorrow's September 22nd, but President Zelenskyy had mentioned a year ago about his vision for U-24, a United 24, which means within 24 hours, an organization can act more powerful than NATO. NATO will be nothing. More powerful than the UN. UN will be nothing. It'll be the U-24, and he's gonna, it's actually today he's going to make an announcement, because this was yesterday. So he is going to announce this within the next day. So he just said tomorrow. So what's interesting is he's going to unveil his plan, his formula to make this happen.
Yes, at a special meeting of the UN Security Council called Order. And tomorrow.
Yeah, when was this? Just give me one sec. When was this posted? Just to make sure. Yeah, so this was yesterday. So that would be today he's going to make an announcement.
I will present the details at a special meeting of the UN Security Council. The main thing is that it is not only about Ukraine. More than 140 states and international organizations have supported the Ukrainian peace formula fully or in part. The Ukrainian peace formula is becoming global. Its points offer solutions and steps that will stop all forms of weaponization that Russia used against Ukraine and other countries and may be used by other aggressors. Look, for the first time in modern history, we have a real chance to end the aggression on the terms of the nation which was attacked. And this is a real chance for every nation to ensure that aggression against your state, if it happens, God forbid, will end, not because your land will be divided and you will be forced to submit to military or political pressure, but because your territory and sovereignty will be fully restored. We launched the format of meetings between national security advisors and diplomatic representatives. Important talks and consultations were held in Hiroshima, in Copenhagen, and in Jeddah on the implementation of the peace formula. And we are preparing a global.
So listen for this term as well. I'm probably going to see if I can get access to that video today, and maybe I'll make a video tomorrow about it if we see highlights of it. But this is called the peace formula. You got to understand the terminology here. He's saying that he has a peace formula that, one, Ukraine will never be attacked again. Two, if you're worried about submitting to a dictatorship, an aggressor coming into your country and dividing your land, and you have to submit to it and all that kind of stuff, don't worry, because I got it under control. This is in the name of peace.
Peace summit. And please, I invite all of you who do not tolerate Copenhagen and in Jeddah on the implementation of the peace formula. And we are preparing a global peace summit. And please, I invite all of you who do not tolerate any aggression to jointly prepare the summit.
So he's going to be organizing a global peace summit. Not sure when that is, if that's in November of this year or whenever, but GPS is the acronym. So Global Peace Summit.
I'm aware of the attempts to make some shady dealings behind the scenes. Evil cannot be trusted. The summit.
Again, GPS summit. This is almost done. We got another minute or so, but it's important. Ukraine, I'm not saying today, but Ukraine did have a reputation of being one of the most corrupt nations in the world. This is according to what other people are saying. This is not me making this stuff up. Shady deals were going on behind the scenes, left, right, and center. This is probably why Hunter Biden was in the mix of something going on with Ukraine, and now Ukraine is at the center of the world's attention. But there was something shady going on with Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden, and Ukraine, making hundreds of thousands of dollars for sitting on certain boards and all this kind of stuff. I won't go into detail on that, but it's important to note that it is on Zelensky's radar, that he knows that this is how people think, how Ukraine operates, and he is telling people that this is not how it's going to operate. We understand that there could be potential for shady deals, but we will not let that happen. I am a political leader, and I promise you, no shady deals will happen under my watch.
And I am aware of the attempts to make some shady dealings behind the scenes. Evil cannot be trusted. Ask Prigozhin if one bets on Putin's promises. Please hear me. Let unity decide everything openly. While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation. Weaponization.
Again, back to the U-24, United 24. He's using this as an example that Russia's tried to push for a final war. He's not saying a war. He's saying a final war. Russia's pushing. And he's saying if we go by the peace formula that I'm going to introduce today, that will never happen again with any nation. We will have so much power that we can prevent the final war from happening. You have to understand what he's saying here.
Must be restrained. War crimes must be war. Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation. Weaponization must be restrained. War crimes must be punished. Deported people must come back home, and the occupier must return to their own land. We must be united to make it, and we'll do it. Slava Ukraini!
All right, that's it for this video. So hopefully you got something out of that. It's there's more behind the scenes stuff that they're telling you, but he's pretty forthcoming, saying that this is in the name of peace, whether it's him or someone else. Talks about the restrainer, basically restraining Russia, preventing the final war. Talks about using weather patterns to basically to weaponize weather patterns. He's talked about drones, all this kind of stuff, because it's on their radar to prevent this from happening to Ukraine. So he's saying that one day, no country will be able to do this to any nation. Why? Because if he enacts the U-24, and as far as I know, I'm the first one to be talking about this. Talked about this last year. You can just check my videos about a United 24. He talks about it in his speech, what he wants to have. He wants to have an organization that is more powerful than the UN, more powerful than NATO, so that they can stop any nation, including the United States. Don't forget that, including the United States. If the United States were to do something, intervene, if you will, somewhere, that the U-24 could stop it within 24 hours. They could invade any country within 24 hours. That's what he's proposing. I'm not making this stuff up. He's going to announce it today. And this is starting to line up with this 7-year tribulation stuff by 2030. So you have to put this stuff on your radar. You have to think about this. Saturday is going to be a big day. September 23rd. Talking about this. Anyways, hope you got something out of this. Feel free to subscribe. Feel free to share your thoughts. Let me know where you are watching this video from. Let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We are growing by leaps and bounds. Thanks again. See you later.